Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald. This week, I am joined by my special guest co-host, Scott Chesney, world-renowned life coach and motivational speaker known as the Commander in Change. Scott was a guest on the podcast in episode 18, and together we interview Laura Berman Fortgang. Laura is a career reinvention catalyst, founder of Now What Coaching, a best-selling author, TEDx speaker. She has 25 plus years in the personal coaching field. She is a sought-after speaker, TV personality, has appeared on multiple morning shows, is a corporate spokesperson, interfaith minister, and performer. Her TEDx talk has over 1.6 million views. Her 5 books, published in 13 languages. Some of her clients have included celebrities, Fortune 500 companies, including NASA. At the age of 5 years old, Laura moved from the U.S. to Venezuela, where she lived until she was 12. She says although she is not Latina in her blood, she feels she is Latina in her heart, and she speaks fondly of her time in Venezuela. Laura found her groove in high school in theater, but the life of an actor is not easy, so depression had set in at one point. After reading the book A Course in Miracles to help her on her journey, her intuition kept nudging her to call a former acting mentor, only to find out that he became a coach, and the rest is history. Laura decided to transform what she would perform from the stage. From being an actor performing in a show, she instead decided to take the stage and help move people to transform. We talk about how coaching is different than therapy and how coaches are now being more sought after than ever. Laura has a ton of energy and a great spirit. To learn more about Laura, go to laurabermanfortgang.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel, stream this podcast on all streaming sites, comment, like, and share, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. The views expressed by all Today is the Day Changemakers podcast guests are their own. Their appearance on the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast does not imply any endorsement of them or any entity that they represent. Have a great week, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald, and as I say every week, I get to interview the inspirers, the changemakers, those who are just busting through the status quo. And today, I am so lucky to have Scott Chesney back co-hosting with me. Hey, Scott, Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year, Jody. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. Scott was on in 2021 during an episode there. So please, everyone, head back to last year and take a look at Scott's episode and learn more about him. Scott is known as the Commander in Change. So Scott, tell everybody how they can find you real quick, because I want to make sure that everybody knows where they can look for you.
You can find me on social media, but everything you want to find out about me is at my website. So it's www.scottchesney.com.
Awesome. So Scott, how excited are you? We are interviewing Laura Berman Fortgang today.
You know what? Honestly, I don't think I've done this anytime that we've co-hosted, but I am actually bowing as much as I can without falling out of my chair because, and I know you're going to get into it, Jody, but this woman has greatly impacted my life, has been an influencer, has been a mentor, has been a coach, and what I love more than anything, if there was one word that I think we could all benefit, is accountability that Jody, Laura has absolutely given to me in my life. You know what? I can't feel my feet because I've been paralyzed for 36 years, but somehow Laura continues to hold my feet to the fire and hold me accountable. And I feel it. I wish everybody had that in their lives.
Aww.
So I'm so happy to be a part of this today.
Well, that's awesome. Laura, wow. I don't even need to go any further, right? Scott is actually just singing your tunes. How are you today, Laura?
Well, now I'm crying. Thanks, Scott.
I know.
We see a lot from Laura, but we don't see tears too often of crying like that. So I like that. We're running a gamut of emotions today.
We are. We're going to do that. And it's so funny because Laura and Laura impacted my life too. So Laura, you're here with people who just adore you and the work that you do and the things that you've done. So maybe we'll have you crying, laughing, all emotions will happen today. So we're so happy to have you here on this episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. So we're going to start with what I do all the time is I read from people's bios, because although Scott and I know what you do and we've been impacted by you, I'm going to share more so people can understand a little bit more about your background. Laura's professional life is anchored by her international reputation as a pioneer and 25 plus year veteran in the personal coaching field. Only one expression of her years supporting people to find meaning, purpose, and satisfaction in their lives. Laura is also a best-selling author, a sought-after speaker, TV personality, Oprah, and all national morning shows. And we're going to go back to that Oprah piece because there's something funny I want to tell you about that. Corporate spokesperson, interfaith minister, and performer. Her TEDx talk currently boasts over 1.6 million views. Laura's 5 books are now published in 13 languages. She has addressed public and corporate audiences in many parts of the world on topics such as reinvention, career satisfaction, and change, as well as bringing coaching to diverse clients ranging from homemakers, celebrities, and Fortune 500 companies to NASA and the Army Corps of Engineers. She's best known for her unique career transition, Now What methodology, and is currently launching her legacy project, the A-List Coach Business Mentoring Program, to train coaches to get extraordinary results for their clients and leveraging them to business success. Wow, how did that feel to hear? Because I know how it felt to read.
Oh, I tune out.
Don't tune out on your own bio. It takes so much to say, you know what it is? It takes so much to get it to paper, doesn't it? I mean, that's years worth of work. I always say that's like your award right there is your bio. That's all.
Jody, I feel unworthy. I don't know about you, but someone who's been to the gym already and has exercised, and you're just waking up and getting the crust out of your eyes. I feel like again, not worthy.
Oh, stop. No, I mean, every year I work to make it shorter and shorter and shorter, so I don't have to sit through my bio when people introduce me. But yeah, I mean, no, when I think about it, I'm like, wow, did I really do all that? You know, when you're in it, you don't. I mean, I enjoy every moment when it's going great, and then other times you're in the valley and you're like, have I done anything? And then you're like, oh, okay, keep going. It's all right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's important for people to know. Like, nothing's ever a peak experience forever. There's peaks and valleys, and I think sometimes, we forget that.
And it feels lonely in the valley sometimes, but you're not totally alone because there's other people's in their valleys too.
Yeah, and also sometimes it's lonely at the top, so to speak. You've heard that, like a leader in an organization may not have anyone to talk to because they're not supposed to let them know that things are not shiny and rosy at the moment, even though you're at the top. So, that's part of why we're constantly, evolving, looking for that next level center of influence, the people you hang out with. And, it's a journey. We all know that.
It is. It truly is. So we know where you are right now. We're going to even get back. We'll go back to that again and we'll learn more about what you're doing right now. But I want to kind of go back a little bit, and because I don't know a lot about the Laura before all of this. And so it'll be fun for us to learn also. I did read a little bit about it, so I think it's going to be fun for the audience to learn as well. It sounds like you had a very interesting childhood, and you speak a couple of languages, lived a couple of different places. So I'd love to go back and learn a little bit about Laura, the little girl Laura.
Little girl Laura. My father's first generation American. My mom is like second generation American, but my dad, he was the first to go to college in his family at 16 years old, getting off a train in Indiana to go to Purdue University. He's Jewish, and they thought he had horns, so my dad really was someone who pursued his dreams, and his dream was to see the world. So he was offered an opportunity to head up an office in Caracas, Venezuela. Wait, I got to do my accent. In Caracas, Venezuela. And, I was 5 years old, and to me that meant we were going to live in a hut with a dirt road and there'll be a donkey and a cart. Like, that was my 5-year-old idea of like, we're moving to a South American country. But Caracas is a very metropolitan city. It is in worse shape now than it was when I lived there in the late 60s and early 70s. It was, there was only rich and poor, no middle class, but it was a beautiful life. And now it's decimated, but that's for another day. But anyway, so I grew up like speaking 2 languages and having a very different lifestyle. I mean, we had live-in help in our house. On Sunday, the maid went home and we went out to dinner and didn't make our beds. I mean, I was very spoiled. So I still have friends from back then. Like, thank goodness for Facebook, but there's people who are still in my life from that period. And I came back to the U.S. with a heavy accent, 12 years old, didn't know who the Beatles were, didn't know what a cheerleader was. And it was more difficult to become an American than it was to become someone who lived in Venezuela.
So interesting. Go ahead, Scott. You're going to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, is there any specific moment, especially when you arrived here, that you were just like so influenced by? You talked about your parents and the influence they had, the wealth. You actually sound a lot like my mother in the fact that like she talks about being growing up with a silver spoon in her mouth. And but do you remember anything that kind of like really, really influenced you? A moment in time back then when you were just like, this is something that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life?
You know, when I was in it so young, like I really, I adjusted. I was really popular in school, which I wasn't when I was in the US. And we had so many adventures, so I was just in it. I didn't really start to appreciate the value of it probably until my later teens, when I spoke a different language. I could being that the US, the Spanish has become the second language of the United States, as that progressed, like that was never foreign to me, In fact, I always say that, kids that eat macaroni and cheese as adults that eat macaroni and cheese as their comfort food because they had it as a kid. Like, no, mine is like, it's called ropa vieja and plátanos maduros, plátanos, plantains and rice and beans. Like that's my childhood comfort food that I look for now as an adult. So it wasn't probably till my late teens or maybe even my early 20s when I lived in New York City that I realized, wow, like how valuable it was that I spoke a second language, because I always felt safe with my surroundings. I understood what was going on around me. I also came to appreciate the culture. I mean, the culture of the Latina and, Latinx community. I mean, I'm trying to get all my PC words here, but the warmest people who value family, like you live at home until you get married, you keep your grandparents in your home, whatever it is, the family and, the warmth of that culture, like that has really stayed with me. And I've spoken like at McDonald's and half the audience speaks Spanish, if not more. And I always say, like, I'll say it in Spanish and I'll say it in English. I say, no es en mi sangre, no soy Latina en mi sangre, pero sí soy Latina en mi corazón. So I'm not Latina in my blood, but I'm Latina in my heart. Like I just love the people, the experiences. And that made me so curious about other language and culture. That's why in college I studied French, I studied Chinese. I thought I was going to be an interpreter for the UN.
Did you ever present on stage or even in a coaching call or whatever you do with your clients? Did you ever basically do it all in Spanish to connect with them?
Except for that time when I was at a big conference for McDonald's where I kind of did Spanglish, like the presentation was in English, but if there was a better word in Spanish, I would throw it in there. And then I also did that for the World Bank, the Latin American region of the World Bank. So they hired me as an English speaking speaker, but knowing I had a community that spoke Spanish, that if I needed to throw something in, I would, because sometimes there's just better words. There's just words that you can't translate, right? So, it has served me well, like, because I learned as a kid and I learned by ear. One of my greatest downfalls as a foreign language speaker is that I'm not good at the grammar, so I don't trust myself to write a business book or to write a paper or a letter in Spanish. Like I can do conversational. French is weaker because I never lived there. Chinese was all memorization, so I've lost that. Now, like a parlor trick, I can say, that means I go to Boston University and study Chinese. That's it. That's all I know.
That's awesome.
It's a parlor trick.
If you have a special talent, then you pull that one out when somebody.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you want me to speak Chinese? Sure, I know one sentence. Or I know how to say, I want to drink tea. It's really bad.
So Jody, write that down though. One thing she can't do is grammar in Spanish, because there's not many things that Laura can't do. But
there's lots of things. I can't put my foot behind my head.
Yeah, there you go.
I can't tie a cherry stem with my tongue. There you go.
That's it.
That's it. This is really good stuff.
That is, and I think it's really, really great. When I was looking, doing a little research on you, seeing that there was that you were bilingual. Three languages really too, right? Because you can do conversational French as well?
Not as well as Spanish, but I got a chance to go to Paris for 3 days, and I started thinking in French, and I thought, oh, one more day and I'd be back, So I'm very close. It's
I
just
love
practice.
That's awesome.
Immersion is everything, like if Scott and I share a school system in a town. We live in the same town, and our kids, they got half an hour of Spanish a week through elementary school, and then you got like 2 times a week in middle school. And we just don't teach language in the U.S. the way other countries teach English. If you meet someone from another country that speaks English, they speak English.
Right.
Yeah.
Our kids graduate with, a little broken whatever language they studied. Very few really speak the language. It's a shame. It's a shame.
It is a shame. I'm just curious about one thing that I want to go back to that you said, which was you were popular in Venezuela, but then when you came back, you didn't feel that way. What made you popular in Venezuela?
I was actually a mean girl. I have to admit, yep, I was a mean girl. I don't know what it was. I was short, I was cute, I don't know. I was creative. We used to act out the local soap opera during recess, and I was like the director of it. I guess I was pretty bossy, but people liked me. And until, then finally after years, they turned on me, and I realized, oh, you can't be a mean girl. Got to stop that mean girl thing. So that was my lesson early on. But I don't know what it was, but definitely when I moved here, I mean, like I said, I had an accent. I didn't shower enough times. Americans are like, 3 showers a day and, don't ever wear the same clothes twice. My accent got me in trouble. Like, I didn't understand the culture. Like I said, I didn't know what the Beatles were or what a cheerleader was. And like one time the kids made me like, oh, we're going to help you get ready for cheerleader auditions. And they showed me the wrong kind of moves just so that they could make fun of me. Like, I went through that kind of BS, So I felt more like an outsider. And then I found my groove in theater, which, I didn't make cheerleading twice. And, and that was just heartbreaking. My mother like was giving me her jewelry to make me feel better because I was like distraught that I didn't make cheerleading. And then in high school, I discovered theater, which my parents had exposed me to in Venezuela, believe it or not. But that's when I found my home, I found my people, and, then I just fit in wherever I went.
Yeah, because theater becomes a family. We know that, right? So that's the good news about it. And the mean girls don't make it in theater. You've got it's really need to come together in order to put a show together. So that's awesome. So talk a little bit about the theater piece, because I know that every time you take the stage, and we'll get to that, I feel like you're using all of those skills you learned probably because, reading about you and knowing about you, it seems as if, as you said, you went that route, you tried that route, and it didn't go exactly the way you planned. But you see, it's interesting, and I just want to point this out real quick, is that sometimes we have an idea and then we have to veer a little and still be able to use the same skills and still get the same feelings from that and that same feeling, of accomplishment from that, even though you might not be doing exactly what you thought you were doing. So just a little.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge life lesson that I hope people hear in this story. And also it's what helped me create my career clarity methodology was part of my own story too, because once I was in college, my parents wouldn't let me be a theater major, right? So I discovered in high school that I loved this and I was pretty good at it. And I paid for my own dance lessons and my own voice lessons. My parents did not believe in this nonsense that I was doing. Wouldn't pay for college if I was going to do theater. So I went to school at Boston University and got cast in a show, for the non-theater majors, like within 3 weeks of being in school. And I did as much theater as I could. And my internship was working for a casting director, right, when I became a senior. And I knew I did summer stock in the summers, like I performed. And I had less fear about creating a resume and getting a real job than I did about I'm going home to New Jersey. I'll commute into the city. I'm auditioning. I have to give this a try. I gave myself 5 years because I didn't want to be 35 and, have a mortgage and never be able to try it. And at year 8, I gave myself 5 years. 5 years, like to have an agent and look like I was headed in a professional direction. At 8 years, I had my union cards. I had done professional work, but I still worked 6 months out of the year roughly as a waitress, among other things, shoe model, you name it. Nothing illegal and nothing nude, because my mother told me no matter how bad it gets, don't ever take your clothes off. And it was the mid-'80s when Vanessa Williams lost her crown in Miss America for posing nude, and my mother told me that. So anyway, trying to fast forward this story, I mean, I really got to a critical point in my mental health where I couldn't understand why I worked so hard. I mean, I was waiting in line at 5 a.m. to get that number for the audition and waitressing every night. And why wasn't it working out for me? So really at my wit's end and truly in a 3-year depression that I thought about killing myself. My parents took me to the local, Lulu bin. I shouldn't call it that. Get me mental health services in an inpatient scenario. And they asked me if I thought of hurting myself. I said yes, and go, we'd like to check you in. And something clicked in me. And I said, if I let them check me in, this is going to be my identity. I'm going to be that sick girl to my parents. I'm not going to come back from this, and I'm not doing this. And I barely remember how I got out of the place, my mother chasing me through the parking lot. But I was like, no, I will heal myself. And I don't recommend this, but I got rid of my therapist. I thought that looking down at the problem and continuing to look at the problems was part of the problem. And I took to a book called A Course in Miracles, which Marianne Williamson is the most popular interpreter of the Course in Miracles, which is basically a very thick book, 365-day meditations on how to change your mind. So I changed my mind, and on the other end of it, I had an inkling to call an old acting mentor of a friend of mine. And the inkling was so strong. It said, he has your next job or career for you. And I'm like, so I wasn't going to call him and go, voice in my head told me you are my next job or career for me. So I called him. Turned out he'd become a coach. Turned out he thought he could help me figure out what else to do with my life. And within 2 years, I was one of the first 16 students at Coach University, the first 16 people that started the International Coaching Federation. And I've done more with my skill set as an actor in this career than I ever did as an actor. And in hindsight, long story, 10 years into my coaching career, I realized, and this is what I use with clients, just like you said, sometimes you veer off the road, that what I wanted out of being an actor wasn't just the applause and how fun it is and how cool it is, but I wanted people to see something on stage that moved them to change their life, or that moved them to think differently, or to accept people different than them, something that moved them to transform. And that's what I do from the stage every single day. Well, this stage too. And so I help people figure out now what is the meaning of their old dreams that still has significance today. You don't have to go be the baseball star or, the famous novelist or the politician if that's what you dreamed of doing. Let's find out what it really means and how do you use it today. So, long story, but that brings us full circle.
Or what was that feeling like, though, when you connected with your coach and he was telling you that he was a coach? I mean, was there that immediate, I know that you probably thought, wow, he can help me get through this. But was there also, and so I'm wondering what everyone who's listening is that instinct, that feeling, whatever it is that says, yes, this is what I want to do next. I'm not saying it's the end all, but this resonates with me. Not only was he looking to help you, but he was helping you also connect with one of your purposes in life and being a coach. Can you just take us through that feeling that I'm sure maybe is different within all of us, but it could be an itch somewhere. It could be in your heart. It could be your head. It could be a tingly feeling. Can you just explain what your experience was like?
Yeah, my experience is, and I interview people, and I ask people about this, how do you know it's intuition, or how do you know it's fear, or how do you know it's some ridiculous, imagination thing, right? I find that intuition is quiet but persistent. If it comes back, his name was Jay, call Jay. 5 days later, call Jay. But it never goes, you're an idiot. That's not your intuition. That's not your intuition.
What is that? What is that voice?
That's your fear and your ego speaking.
Love that.
Love that. And if people believe in, Satan, then it's Satan.
Yeah, it's your saboteur, your total saboteur.
It's your saboteur, right? So I mean, that voice just said, call him. And folks, it was before the internet. I had to call 411 and get his number from the phone book. But I remembered he lived in Maplewood, New Jersey at the time, and I found him. and we hadn't talked in a while. But, it wasn't an instant recognition that I was going to be a coach. It was an instant recognition that he had the steps for me. My intuition did say next career or next job, but it wasn't like it's coach. Because what we worked on, I started working, how I started making inroads into corporations was I was an actor. It made sense to teach people how to do presentation skills. So that's what my first 2 years were. And then I realized, but I go deeper with people than just what you say and how you hold your hands. It was bringing out the better human. And then I realized, I want to do what you do. And it coincided with exactly when Thomas Leonard was starting Coach University. So I consider myself second generation. Jay was one of the 10. How many people did Jesus have around him? The disciples, like
12.
10, 12, 12?
10 or 12, Jody?
I think it's 12.
I know we're bad right
Neither
now.
of us wants to foul up on that answer.
I know.
I think it's 12.
I think it's 11.
So including him, that's 12. So he had this little group of people that he hand taught how to be coaches, and then they were the first teachers of Coach University. So I was second generation. I had them as my teacher, and I made it into 13 of the 36 modules before I became the training director and started training the next generation of teachers for Coach University. Like, we were growing so fast, I didn't even finish the program. I mean, I did eventually, but not in real time. So anyway, can you repeat that kind of luck? Who knows? I just know I was incredibly fortunate to be at the right place at the right time. No one knew what it was. And now people go, I met 50 of you coaches this week. It's a bit saturated. But I knew I had found something that had changed my life. And I was just like a converted smoker, a recovered smoker. I was lecturing everybody,
I think that the key here, I'm sorry, Scott, is that the key here, I think, is that people, you started off saying, I'm going to be an actor, and then you listened to your intuition, which people, like you said, don't know if it's their intuition or what it is that it's not gnawing at them. But the key also is to really be present and pay attention, I think, to the path, right? Because you're sometimes you're lost because you're so in it and you're so attached to the outcome. And it's like, no, but I want to be an actor. But no, this is the other path. So if I just want to say this to the listeners, if there's something that's pulling you, it's important that you pay attention to it. Because if Laura didn't do that, you wouldn't be sitting here today. If that feeling of calling Jay didn't happen. So one little veer changes your entire life. I think it's important to really think about it like that. One little step you take, I always say that every day, to get closer to your goal can change your entire outcome. And the last thing I just want to mention on this, Scott, is that I met Laura and I was the one in the audience and I was the one who was affected by what you said. Real fast though, the Oprah thing, the reason I brought that up was because our daughters met at the Paper Mill Playhouse Conservatory. That's how I met you. And both in there, and I needed a speaker for one of our nonprofit events that I was hosting. And my daughter said to me during the summer, hey, I want to stay at my friend's house from Conservatory. And I'm like, oh, I don't know her. I don't normally let my daughter just sleep, do a sleepover. And she's like, no, but her mom's been on Oprah.
So she must be okay.
Yeah, she's gonna be okay because she's been on Oprah, Mom. It's okay. And I'm like, well, I need to talk to her. I understand she's been on Oprah. It's kind of like a funny thing because it was very funny the way it just came out of her mouth, very, very matter of factly. She's been on Oprah, so she's fine, Mom. I could stay. She was 10. And
that's hysterical. I don't think you've ever told me that. That is so funny.
I never did. And she had the best time over there, but it was just so funny. So then you spoke at one of my events and your mentor had passed when, only days before, and you called me and you still came, and it was a snowstorm and you came from the funeral and you stood there on that stage, Laura, and it was snowing on top of everything else that day. You made it on time. You just come from a funeral. You were breathing, you were fine, you weren't frazzled. It was you're so professional. You get up there and all of a sudden a ray of sun through the clouds of the snow comes across your face while you're presenting. I am standing at the back of the room listening to you and I was lost. I was working so many hours. I loved what I was doing. I was in nonprofit. You get up there, you share. I watch you take everybody on this journey. Literally, like you said, a performance. They're laughing, they're crying, and they're leaving inspired. And I said, I want to do that. And it was a moment for me That, and then I reached out to you and you gave me some advice about what I should do to go get my certification. So all of us here are coaches and all of us different paths. But I just want to say, if you stay open, like I did that day, I didn't expect that you were going to change my life. You were, my daughter's friend's mom who was on Oprah.
That blows me away, and it makes me so happy. Like, I've had people call me and go, I heard you speak 5 years ago, and I want you to know that I bought a bed and breakfast in North Carolina and left my corporate job, and it was all because of you. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm sure you guys experienced that. Scott's been speaking a long time, and sometimes these things take some time for the seeds to germinate, and it's always humbling and amazing to hear that someone really did something and you had a little part in it. And sometimes you don't even know that you did. So it's even more humbling.
Oh, yeah.
And now we're all crying. And you're making me really grateful today. I'm so appreciative. When it's gray and snowing, January and February are my worst months. I'm saying this to everyone. Like, I've been doing my live broadcast and say, I get sad, seasonal affective disorder. I definitely do. And so it's just so nice to be talking to you both and being like, oh, it's still sunshine somewhere in the world.
Laura, we could do a show just on all the reasons why people hire a coach. So I don't want to really ignore someone out there who maybe reason we don't address today. If there was an umbrella with all these responses, all these reasons why people hire a coach, what would you say that big umbrella is as to why people hire a coach?
There's a gap between where they are and where they want to be, period. That's it. Whether it's your relationship, your love life, your health, your work goals, who you want to be as a parent. So it doesn't matter what kind of coach that you hire. The bottom line is there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be.
So everybody needs a coach then?
Yes, sir. We know that.
Yeah, exactly. But also, Laura, I think it's very important because people go, well, what's the difference between a coach and a therapist?
Very important distinction. And I have an answer for that. So therapy to me is about healing the past so that you can be okay in the present, right? So something's bothering you or stopping you, or a pattern keeps repeating that hurts you, or you have trauma. And it's about going back to the places where you didn't feel the feelings so you can be whole and okay today. Coaching is about taking the strengths of what you have right now and leveraging those to a new future. So therapy about the past, coaching about the future. And sometimes as a coach, you hit on a therapy issue. You do. But you have to A, recognize it, B, not become the therapist. The therapist needs to process it with somebody. They need to revisit it several times. Like, I'll give you a quick example. So I was working with a young man who got promoted to sales manager because he was a great salesman. Not always the best idea to make a good salesperson a manager. So they needed him to be a better leader. He was so insecure about being a leader. It's like, I'm younger than them, blah, 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 blah. And I said, there was more to it than that. I said, I think we have something here about a family issue. And he goes, well, my dad was tough, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So, okay, we kept going. We were successful in getting his team built and him as a leader, etc. 2 years later, I'm at an event in Boston. He comes to see me and he goes, I got to tell you, you were right. It was all about my dad. I went to therapy, worked it out, right? So that's how in coaching, if it does not stop the progress, you can keep coaching. But if it became like they really need to revisit that, there's a lot of pain, then I need to refer out to a therapist. And often we work with people who need both, and that's fine.
Absolutely.
Do you have people, and I love that because I do that as well as I refer people to therapists. Do you find that there are therapists who refer people to coaches?
I do. I've had that experience. I mean, I have a therapist in my circle who, anytime someone really has career, it's like a woman who was divorced and now she has to go to work like she's never worked. What does she do? She sends her to me. So yes, but I recently, in a conversation with some therapists, they have to be really careful because of the laws of how they are allowed to operate, that they can't refer to a friend that is in their circle because they can't appear to have any, how do I put this? Like anything that was improper in terms of advising you to spend your money anywhere. So, it's better if there's a therapist who, how do I put this? They know of you instead of actually being a friend of yours. That's a tough one. But yes, I know of therapists who refer out for other things. Sure. One more thing I want to add though, because a lot of people go, well, what's the difference between a coach and a consultant? Right? So if you're going to work on your business with me as a coach, yes, there's some steps X, Y, or Z, but a lot of it's going to be about how you have to change to be able to manage it all, be able to make it happen. And a consultant is really someone who isn't working on your transformation. They're working on telling you what to do, right? So step 1, do this, step 2, do that, step 3, do that, step 4, do that. So I think that's an important distinction too, because coaches help you transform as well as do X, Y, or Z, and consultants, like, they don't care about your transformation. They just care that you do what you paid them to tell you to do.
Pam 10 is a leader in IT enterprise solutions and staffing. They are driven to transform their clients' business performances. They do this every day by providing their clients with the best services and products. Products like BizLego, an online community platform, and Colear, a unique learning management system. They also transform the lives of women and children through their associated nonprofits, SheTech, which supports women in and joining the technology field, and Softkin, support organization for kids in need. Pam 10, technology for social good. Go to pam10.com for more information.
I do have a question, because the word coach, you said it before, a lot of people are using that title now. And like you said, you can meet 50 in one day. And so I think, I've been trying to, in my practice, trying to come up with a different word, right? Because of the fact that it is overused. I'm so glad though, because 6 years ago, I can't imagine when it was when you started, but 6 years ago when I started, people are still looking at me like, what is a coach and what does that mean? And all that fun stuff. I can't even imagine what it was like years and years ago. Have you thought of, another word that works better than the word coach, do you think?
I have used many words because I'm 27 years at this. I was just a baby, everybody, just a baby. And people are like, soccer? What? Anyway, I find, yes, I've used the word expert. I've used the word strategist. I've used other words. But what I've come to see that works better is to not use any word at all, but to tell people the outcomes you create. So if I'm speaking to someone who I know needs career coach, my career coaching is not about your resume or your LinkedIn. It's about what do you want to do with your life. So I literally say, people, what do you do? I help people figure out what to do with their life. And the answer I get is, oh my God, I need you, or my cousin needs you, or where were you last year, right? Or I work with business owners to come up with their intellectual property so that they can leverage that to new products and successes. Oh, I need that, right? So coaching is the how we do it. So I take out the word coach and I just speak to the outcomes I create. And if that's your outcome, you're going to hire me. And that's what I teach other coaches too in my program. I have a new program called Foundations, helping coaches get their practices in order. And I just say, forget the word coach. And yet I still pay my dues as an International Coaching Federation member. I pay my dues to keep my master coach credential because I really do believe that this needs to be one of a profession where people have some training and background. So it does bother me greatly that so many people use the word for anything that means one-on-one. But I just feel like we will do better describing it as no title at all, but rather the outcome we create.
I love that.
And even if your outcome is just I help people get from where they are to where they want to be, that's generalist, but it's a great place to start.
Absolutely.
So with that, Scott, do you want to talk a little bit about Laura's alter ego?
Oh, dear God.
Now, all of us, I think, have an alter ego, but very few of us actually unleash our alter ego. It's one of the amazing things. And again, I have to believe that in some level it's intertwined in your speaking. It's intertwined in we're seeing it to a degree. We haven't necessarily heard it, but we're starting to feel it a little bit in this interview right now. But to actually experience Lurleen is something that you can plan for. It's something that you can even do research on, but until you experience it, you have no clue of what's in store for you. Tell us a little bit about Lurleen and how you were open. It's one of those things, you talk so much about being open, on how you allowed Lurleen to surface in your life and how she's enhanced your life.
Before you do that, before you do that, I just have to read this real fast.
I'm looking around for Lurleen.
In 2016, there was a title of an article that was written about you, and the title was "Coach Finds Her Inner Glitter."
Ooh.
Yes. Okay. Lurleen's here now. All right. Just so people don't think that I'm crazy and I like really have a split personality. It's that, not crazy. I use that word, but I don't mean any disrespect to anyone with mental illness. Doing something for a long time, you have to reinvent, right? So I probably reinvent every 3 years. I hate to say, probably because I'm someone who gets bored, but I've stuck with coaching this long because I keep finding new ways to do it. And I was a musical theater actor, did not do a show for 17 and a half years, right? My kids had to get to a certain age where I was like, I kind of want to do this. So I did a show where I played a Southern woman living in a trailer her name was Badass Betty. All right. In the musical, Great American Trailer Park Musical. Okay. Her name was Badass Betty. All right. So you can just imagine this character. I had such a good time. I was in a cast with children practically, and I would not accept their non-professional levels. Like, look, I'm doing the show and I'm doing it after 17 years of not doing a show, so get your act together. I'm not going to take any crap from any of you. And so we put on this great show. Weeks go by, and I'm still talking like her, and my kids are like, would you stop this already? Would you stop? And I had this inkling, okay, another inkling, folks, to call the author of the show. Ballsy, call her up, and I say, look, I cannot shake this character. How much room do I have to play with her? Can I create a character based on this? She's like, well, you're an author. You can't take my character. Plus, I'm thinking of doing a second version. And I'm like, of course, duh. I felt crestfallen. But I was sitting at my computer and I don't know where this came to me from. Another inkling. I wrote, and forgive me if this insults anyone. It's not PC. I wrote white trash names. And I found a white trash name generator. So I put in Laura, and I got back Lurleen and Hornblower. And I went, oh my God, that's it. It's Life Coach Lurleen. Folks, that set off. I went to improv. I hired an improv coach. I did it improv at a couple of coaching conferences. And then I decided it needed to be a one-woman show. And the one-woman show was Life Coach Lurleen, who lived in a trailer, and her dream was to coach all the people in the People magazine because they have everything and they're not happy. And I got nothing and I'm happy. And I have my inner glitter. So there's the inner glitter. Lurleen helps people find their inner glitter. So I did this one-woman show at the local playhouse. I raised $5,000 for them to fix their roof. I didn't take any money. And I spent a couple of years evolving this show until I finally did it in a theater in Wisconsin in front of strangers. And it was not as good as I thought. Because when you have an audience of friends, they're very kind and forgiving. And it really was a moment of like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Do you want to go back into show business because this takes full-time attention, or are you done? And I was done. And then the next year I ran for office. The year after that article was written, I ran for office in 2017 and 2019.
Wait. Was that as Lurleen or as Laura?
No, honey, no. But what happened was I did another play because my son was the drummer, and I said, Mama's going to get herself a role in this play. And I did. And in the middle of the play, I decided to run for office, and I was playing an old woman on a bus, and I never played anything before that said old in the title. And I was playing a prostitute. So I made them take the word hooker out of the program where you see Laura Fortgang hooker. No, take that out. Do not take any pictures of me. Do not put my picture in the newspaper because I'm running for office. And I had to take Lurleen down. You can't find her right now. And I took Lurleen down, but folks, it's 2022. I ran for office twice. I lost twice. I'm so happy I lost, and I will bring Lurleen back to life. So there's the story.
Laura, I'm just wondering, could Lurleen possibly be your running mate?
You know, that's a darn good idea. Wouldn't that be something? In today's world, anything goes.
I got the tingling for Lurleen to be running mate. I'd vote for you in a heartbeat.
You know what? I think that should become a new Instagram live, right? So Laura comes on and says something, and then Lurleen comes on and go, hell no. This is what we're going to do.
Yes.
You're on to something, dude. Yes. I think you just gave me my new TikTok.
Oh, look at that. That's everything happens right here on the podcast. Look at that.
I'm serious. My hand is like, it feels so right.
Yeah, I'm getting the little hair standing up on edge here.
It's happening, and it happened here.
Yes, it's your doing, sir. You added, both of you. It was the triple synergy. But anyway, that's the Lurleen story. My children hate her because she comes. Well, no, she's fun. Wait, I shouldn't say that. My daughter was 9 at the time. It was around the time of I don't know, no, 20, whatever. She decided to write herself a role in my show. So she was my niece, Mary Lou, who did the pageants, and I was her pageant coach.
Perfect.
And people had seen the show and said, get the kid out. She's stealing the show. Get the kid out of the show. Yeah.
Well, she is really talented.
Well, then she outgrew it. Then she was like, I'll be damned. Once she got to high school, she's not going to appear in her mother's show.
No, not at all. Oh my gosh, that is so.
And wait a minute, I got to ask, because he's doing a lot in college right now. What was Wyatt's reaction to Lurleen?
So Maya and Wyatt are twins, folks. I have a set of twins and an older son. And Wyatt hated it until Maya put herself in the show, and then he decided he needed a part in the show. So in he only did it once, but in one version, he was a fan of Mary Lou, the pageant girl. And he had a t-shirt that said, I heart Mary Lou. And he's had health challenges over the years that affect his cognition. So at the time, he was not able to really learn a line or anything, but he just came up and he was cute and he had his part and he was done. That's it. He's not the stage person in our home. He's the backstage person.
Everybody has a part.
That's right. Oh no, like if we ever, had to escape and be the Von Trapp family, we could do it. We've got a guitarist, a drummer, lots of singers and performers. We could make it.
You can say it's a very creative family. I love that. That's amazing. It takes a skill, but how fun and exciting because your kids too, right? They've gotten to see the serious Laura who's helping to transform lives. They've gotten to see the funny Laura who is still helping to transform lives using, comic relief. And that kind of really, the kids are always watching everything that we do. And you can see how you're not just changing all these strangers' lives, you're doing incredible things and your kids are following in your footsteps in different ways. So how do you feel like them seeing you go through the years has affected them?
Well, I've definitely created 3 people who don't have any interest in having a job. So, I don't mean that in terms of like they won't work, but we're 2 self-employed people who have made up their lives as they go. And I see my children doing the same thing. And I'm like, ooh, of course, I can only imagine what my parents went through. But, I've got a drummer living in New York City who wants to play on Broadway and he's doing all right. My daughter's in college doing musical theater. And Wyatt is studying film and production at Montclair State. So, we're not the regular paycheck people, so that'll be interesting. We've definitely modeled life is made up. You just make it up. You don't have to fit into a box that somebody made for you. And I think that that's important. And I want to say one thing, is kind of tooting my horn a little bit, but you had mentioned, doing the comedy bit. There was a woman who saw the Lurleen show who came up to me afterwards and said, I would never go to a self-help thing in my life. Wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And I actually got something out of this. And that was my goal, was like, how can I do something so silly and so crazy, but somewhere along the line, somebody got something out of it that moved them on the scale. of their life.
What? Your versatility, I think, is so useful and impactful, whether you're on the big stage, whether you're on a podcast like this, because you're taking us on a journey just through this podcast, or even through your coaching. So I have to believe that all these, and I want to be respectful here, almost like characters that you're able to go into, depending on who your audience is or your client is going to, like the right person, the right terminology, the right tone, whatever it may be, is going to surface for what that person needs in that moment. And I think that is such a gift. And I know wrapped up in that gift is a skill set that you've cultivated through all your different experiences, that it's almost in a way, and I think I had mentioned this to Jody when we were talking before the show, is that it's almost like in a way, like a comedian, in which you think like a comedian, like they're only going to be relevant for a little while, but the real good comedians are taking what's going on in the world and adapting and being versatile. That's why you say every 3 years you're changing your stuff. I think that's so important and impactful, and why not only have you maintained your coaching profession and your speaking profession and your author and everything else, is that you've grown it. So it's not like you're constantly being relevant. And I think that's so important. So to hear that woman say that and everything that you connected, that's normally someone who, you know what, okay, another presentation or another keynote address, you make the connection. And I think that's phenomenal. It's such a treat and such a joy to be able to be in your energy and experience that.
Oh, thank you. I want to draw it right back to where the conversation started. If I hadn't been that kid living in a different culture and having to adjust to cultures, I don't think I'd be everything that you just said. It's like, who are you in front of? How are they going to understand you? How do you reach them? Is there when I worked in corporate coaching before coaching really took off, because once the big consulting firms got into it, like I didn't want to compete with them. And so how could I do that if I have no corporate background? You learn the language, right? They say, when in Rome, do as the Romans. You learn the language. So I just want to point that out to anybody out there. Like, we all are multifaceted, but it's just thinking outside of the box. Like all my kids who are entrepreneurial, I say to them, look, Skylar, you're not just a drummer. You have to have other things, right? So he's learned all percussion. He knows how to program synthesizers for the, in the orchestra. He is a music director. He doesn't compose his own stuff, but he can arrange, right? So you have to look at yourself as a spoke in a wheel, and you have a core skill set, but how do you have many ways that it goes out into the world, because that's the world we live in, right? We're never just one thing anymore, I don't think. That's how we get bored.
Yeah. The one thing I just want to add to that is some people get stuck because they're so afraid that they're going to be perceived and judged in a certain way. And so they don't put their authenticity out. They're always worried about how they're going to be perceived. And they're also worried about the fact that, is anybody connect with me? Is anybody going to care? So I better act this way, or I better act that way, or I really don't know who to be, or all kinds of things that go on in entrepreneurs' minds while they're trying to get themselves out there in the coaching world or whatever world you're in. I think for me, what I found out, I want to see about your take on this, is your authenticity and being who you are is what differentiates you. The important thing is not to try to be or emulate Laura or me or Scott or anybody else. You have to be you. That's who people connect with. That's why there's a million authors and doctors and lawyers and coaches, because people connect with different people. Your take on that, because I feel like authenticity sometimes gets lost because people fear to be who they are. So they try to be like you, and that doesn't work.
It's never sustainable. You can start out thinking that way. And sometimes how we get ourselves motivated to do something outside of our comfort zone is to have a role model, right? So it helps at first, but then you've got to find your way. And, I've just learned over and over, like, I'll just give you an example of this. Like, if I put out a newsletter that's a little more personal and I'm like, oh, I don't know if, I'm sure Scott can attest this too. Like, I don't want to put this out. I don't know if I should put this out. And I press send. It's always the ones who are most vulnerable that people respond the most.
That happens to me all the time too. And I've helped to putting that armor on. I spent a lot of time with the armor on. Be the professional, Jody, and don't show. Well, as soon as you start to peel those layers away, it's amazing. People just want to connect with the human. And I think that's
They
really
do. And you had mentioned authors, and I, to anyone who's thinking of writing a book, many times they're like, yeah, but it's been said, everybody, there's a million books on this, and you just have to realize that you're going to say it in a different way, and it might be exactly the way that someone needs to hear it, so there's plenty of room to keep evolving and in reinventing even the same topics.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. And I know we want to hear a little bit before we go, because I know that that we're almost at that hour, is that what programs are you doing right now that people can get engaged and involved in? I want to make sure that we.
Oh, thank you. Well, they can go to nowwhatcoaching.com if you're someone who's like, what do I want to do with my life? And if you're a coach or a service-based business owner who's really ready to, I don't want to say scale like that has to mean $1 million, to scale up to whatever your next level is, you want to go to the alistcoach.com. And both of the, there's no deadline on either of those at the moment. We're going to have spring programs coming up in March and April. Thank you for asking.
Of course. I want to make sure people can find you. I think that's so important. So Scott, any last minute questions before I ask Laura the last question?
No, I'm looking forward to a response to your amazing questions.
Oh no!
Well, what that is, I nope.
So every year I ask the same last question to my guests, and I'm talking about writing a book. I am doing that with the answers from those different people who have sharing their incredible wisdom. So this year the question is for all of my podcast guests: what is the footprint you are creating now that you want to be known for, that you're leaving behind?
Lurleen can answer this if she needs to.
Both. We could go.
Just kidding.
No, she would give the inner glitter answer, but we'll connect it. So Lurleen wants you to have inner glitter, and Laura translates that as figuring out what you're built to do. And I really hope that I can leave behind a methodology and a track record of that everyone is built to do something. You already have it in you, and I want to help you discover it. And now we have a way. That's what I'd like to leave. Like, we've all been given a paper map in high school. What do you like and what are you good at? That ain't it. You need to be a fine-tuned GPS, and I'm working on tuning that GPS to last after I'm dead. There you go.
Beautiful.
And seconds flat. See, that's the creativity you have in your mind, and the performer that you are. Improv is perfect for you. So that's.
But I know that answer.
She's been in an elevator with someone who needed to do
who
that
said,
quickly
what are you
before the
doing
next
right
floor.
now?
We know that.
I love it. So Scott, any last minute thoughts about this interview? I think it's been such an incredible time here.
I honestly feel, because I've watched all your programs, Jody, I think this is not because I'm here. You two could have done this all without me, but I think this is the best podcast yet. And I really think that everyone out there is going to be able to take something away from it, and it's going to impact their lives. So thank you both for allowing me to be here. And Laura, just continue to shine. You're in my backyard here and everything. I don't see you too often. I want to make that more.
Yeah, let's change that.
Let's make that happen 2022. I don't like the snow either. I just rotate, but we'll find a way to make it happen. But keep doing you and inspiring and motivating us all. So thank you.
Well, thank you for your generosity and your beautiful observations here. And Jody, thank you for letting me talk about myself. My kids don't let me do that. It's fun.
I don't
so
either.
Embarrassing, Mom. You're so embarrassing.
Ah, totally.
Well, this has been so awesome. And it's been so great for me because you helped me on my journey. So this kind of brings this whole thing full circle as well. And like I said, you just never know. You could say one specific thing and change someone's life. My goal is always just one. If you change more or help someone more than just one, it's such a beautiful miracle. So thank you, Scott Chesney. Thank you, Laura Berman Fortgang, for being a part of the podcast today. And I'm going to say what I say at the end of every single podcast. Today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what small or large step are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goal? Thank you so much to both of you. Have a great, great week, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.